Well, it's time now for perspective, and we're staying with that story as Pope Francis travels to Iraq for the country's first ever papal visit. Back in 2003, there were around 1.4 million Christians living in Iraq. Now, almost 2 decades on, following the US-led invasion and the Islamic State group's targeted persecution of Christians, only around 250,000 remain. My guest today is Emanuel Youkhana, an archimandrite or priest of the Assyrian Church of the East. He's also the head of CAPNI, or the Christian Aid Programme, Northern Iraq. Thank you so much for being with us here on France 24 today. Now, this papal visit has been over 2 decades in the making. You're speaking to me from Baghdad today. What does it mean to you and your community that Pope Francis is set to arrive on Iraqi soil in just a matter of hours?
Good morning, and thank you for hosting this interview and following this historical visit of His Holiness Pope Francis. The visit for itself is a historical one. He is the first Pope ever visiting this biblical land, because Mesopotamia is part of the Bible. It's the homeland of Father Abraham and other prophets as well, like Jonah, who preached in Nineveh. So it is historic in this meaning, but most importantly, it's also historic because it is his first visit during the pandemic. So despite the pandemic and despite the unstable and security risks in Iraq, he is paying in this he is reflecting his love, his concern, and his action of solidarity. It's beyond that statement of solidarity. It's action of solidarity toward Christians, but not exclusively Christians, but to all the persecuted minorities in Iraq, to come to build a future, common future for all communities in Iraq, regardless of their religion, the ethnicity, the cultural identity, as citizens, to build a common future with all and for all, in a peaceful way, keeping the justice and dignity for all.
Now, on
so we are very optimistic. We are very optimistic. We are hoping that this visit will make a difference.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I think there's a slight lag on the line, so do bear with me. On the Pope's first day in Iraq, he'll be leading a prayer session in Mosul, surrounded by 4 destroyed churches. You were one of the first people to enter Mosul after the defeat of the Islamic State group in 2017. At the time, you said you couldn't imagine that Christians would readily return to Mosul. Is that something that you still believe?
Well, unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, almost now 5 years following the retaking of Mosul, I never used the liberation of Mosul, because liberation means much more than what we had in reality. Unfortunately, after almost 5 years, the bells of the church are not ringing in this very ancient Christian city of Nineveh, Mosul. And unfortunately, again, I would say, I hope I am wrong, but unfortunately, there are no indicators on the ground that the Christian community will restore the presence and the demography and the population in Mosul.
Now, between 2014 and 2017...
So far, only 50 families are back.
Sorry, again, slight lag on the line. I do apologise. Now, between 2014 and 2017, Iraqi Christians, of course, suffered immensely under the Islamic State group. Excuse me. Tens of thousands of Christians were forced to flee. Just how bad has the persecution of Christians been in Iraq in recent years for people who aren't familiar with it?
Okay. The persecution of Christians didn't start in 2014. It is true that under ISIS, and because of ISIS, the persecution had become more barbaric with this crimes, with this, huge destruction of their churches, of their properties, of their towns, and of course, losses of lives. But actually, the persecution started even before that. It is for long decades, the Christians are not considered as equal citizens of the Iraqi state. This is reflected in the discrimination, it's reflected in the constitution, in the legislation, in the curricula, in the education system, and in the daily life. Many limit that the persecution is only when it is an organized persecution by organization like jihadi organization like ISIS, or before that was Daesh in Iraq. But actually, the persecution is even more. It's in detailed daily life. It's in the culture environment, in the market, in the offices, everywhere. So it is the persecution in different means, on different levels. But of course, there is difference when I speak about Iraqi Christians. There is difference between Christians in the Kurdistan region and Christians under central government regions.
Now, for the next few days, of course, all eyes will be on Iraq and the Pope's visit, of course. But once the Pope's left, is there enough political will in Iraq to address the persecution, the ongoing economic, educational, political persecutions of Christians in Iraq?
Unfortunately and painfully, I have to say that despite all what happened, the genocide against Christians and Yazidis in Shingal, in Mosul, in Nineveh Plain. Despite all of that, and it is now almost 7 years after 2014, ISIS rising and controlling 2/3 of Iraqi territories, but up to date there is no serious national debate on what happened, why it happened, how to be prevented. So unfortunately, there is no, we hear, and we will hear during His Holiness visit, and even after that, we will hear very nice statements by Iraqi politicians, decision makers, but on the ground, on the reality, unfortunately, Christians and Yazidis, we are not convinced in practice that we are part of this society, we are part of this country, to feel home in this country, unfortunately.
Emanuel Youkhana, Archimandrite of the Assyrian Church of the East. Thank you so much for speaking to us here on France 24 today.
Thank you for being voice for the voiceless.